You've just spoken to Virginia Giuffre's ghostwriter. What did she have to tell you about the publication of the book and, in general, the allegations against Prince Andrew?
Yeah, good morning. It was a sort of a chilling and sort of dark interview, if you like, with the ghostwriter, the collaborator of this book, Amy Wallace. It was kind of an insight into the power and the darkness of these sex trafficking rings, most obviously symbolised by Jeffrey Epstein and by Ghislaine Maxwell. Obviously, the allegations around Prince Andrew are central to this book. We should make clear from the outset that the Prince denies all of these allegations. But the first question I really put to Amy Wallace was, how could she be sure about the accuracy of the memories contained in the book? So as the ghostwriter of her book and her great collaborator and an independent journalist in your own right, you're in no doubt about the claims that she makes about Prince Andrew, not just knowing her, but abusing her.
I have no doubt. I've been a journalist for 30 years. I've worked at magazines, newspapers. I understand fact-checking. We had a professional fact-checker go over this after my own meticulous research. I have no doubt of what we assert in this book.
So, of course, this was published at Virginia Giuffre's request after her death. But did she reveal, Amy Wallace, what she felt when she was alive about the royal family's response to her abuse claims?
Well, you're right. I mean, this is a posthumous memoir, so we can never know precisely how Virginia would respond to the isolation and ostracism the royal family announced last week surrounding Prince Andrew. Certainly, Amy Wallace suggested to me that this is a step in the right direction. And I asked her, did she want King Charles to actually read the book?
My sense of King Charles is he's always been a very decent man. Virginia's hope was to really help other victims of abuse. But yes, we need, this cause needs more people speaking out. And it needs men speaking out, not just women.
And the King of England would be a prime example.
He would be a prominent man saying this is an outrage.
Well, the publication of this book today, Robert, is actually triggering a lot of looking ahead. And Amy still thinks that there's a way that that Prince Andrew could help with the investigation into the paedophile sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In what way?
Well, this is the key point that Amy Wallace made to me, which is that it's never too late for those who have been involved in the abuse of young women to do the right thing. So she wants Prince Andrew to step forward, and this is how she put that to me.
But he was in the houses. He was on the jets. He was on the island. And he could come forward and help investigators. Remember, he said at one point that he was perfectly willing to do so, and then that help never materialized.
Obviously, Robert, she was approaching this, as she said at the outset there, as a professional journalist with 30 years' experience. But she spent a long time with Giuffre. She spent, I think, more than a month actually living with her and her family. What did she think of her?
She admired her. She believes deeply that Virginia's story needed to be told. The overwhelming sense you get from reading this book and from talking to Amy Wallace and to sort of getting this insight into the world of these sex trafficking rings is just how many men are still out there, powerful men who have never been held to account. And I think that's really the point about this book, and it's certainly the one that Amy Wallace wants to get across, is this book, this posthumous memoir, if you like, is a cry for justice. It's a cry for accountability above all else.
Well, Robert, we'll be hearing a lot more from you and that interview through the day here on ITV, particularly in the ITV news programmes as we go through the day. Thank you very much for staying up for us. I know it's getting off at 2 o'clock in the morning there. We'll let you get to bed. Thanks for your time this morning.
Absolutely fascinating. So we have approached Prince Andrew with the new allegations. He has not responded, but vigorously denied the accusations against him in a statement on Friday.
Should we talk about the front page of the Times? Because your paper this morning says, how can Andrew still afford to live in the lodge, in Royal Lodge at Windsor? And the Times explains. They found out. They say he's not paid a penny rent on his Grace and Favour mansion on the Windsor estate for 2 decades. They've got hold of the leasehold agreement for Royal Lodge, and that reveals the terms under which he lives there in this 30-room building. And it states that he paid £1 million for the lease and £7.5 million, all in one go, for refurbishments in 2005, and then that was it. He's got the lease until, 2078. That scales down to an annual rent, if you like, of about £130,000, which for a place like that is cheap.
It's half
the price.
That would be half the market rent, because it would be at least $250,000, at least.
Yeah.
The penny's dropped. Now we understand how he can
we know how he does it. He doesn't pay anything.
And it's well done to the Times for getting the lease. It's come somehow from the Crown Estate, and was a sweetheart deal done. The Crown Estate has to be open and transparent about all its dealings, and I think we need to know why Andrew's not paying any rent.
And where did he get a total of £8.5 million in 2005?
Yeah, because
did we pay for it?
Well, no. Don't think the Mail are reporting today that he did not get a major inheritance from the Queen or the Queen Mother. And the Queen... Now, the Queen Mother used to own this building, so I assumed the money... So when she died, I thought perhaps he inherited money from the Queen Mother, which would enable him to do those improvements. But he apparently had a very minor bequest from the Queen Mother. So where did the money come from?
It's a murky world.
He's an ex-sailor.
We
That's what he
understand
is.
the King sort of has cut him off, and he has a £20,000 a year Navy pension.
Yeah.
So that's not going to lead to this kind of money, is it?
£20,000 a year pension is £400 a week. How can you live in that place with huge security costs and everything else? Where did his money come from? And this is potentially another scandal. That is what is said, because he's hawked himself around the world, and he's met some pretty unsavoury people. When he was supposed to be the UK trade ambassador, in fact, you went on a trip with him, didn't you? I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing by your part, but you went on a trip with him. But
it's all official and above board, and I wrote about it in the Telegraph.
It was said he was meeting people for his own self-interest, too.
What was he like on that trip, Andrew?
Actually, I got on very well with him. I spent 4 or 5 days with him, can't remember how many days it was, and we went to a number of events where he was meeting businessmen and women. It was Singapore, we were in Singapore, and a lot of Singapore's money, and there's a lot of money in Singapore, came to see the King's son.
So was he effective as a trade envoy in that role at that time?
He was magnetic in the sense he drew money in, and believe it or not, in the same hotel I was in, I bumped into the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And
to you?
Yeah.
Fair question.
That could have happened at any point in any corridor.
And I said, hang on, mate. I said, what are you doing here? Because that very day, Gordon Brown was making a speech to the Labour Party conference, so he'd obviously rather be in Singapore than at the Labour conference. But I told him what I was doing. I was writing a piece about Prince Andrew, and he gave me a quote saying that he was outstanding in the role.
OK.
Wow.
Well, coming back to Royal Lodge, this is going to increase the public pressure on the palace to kick him out.
Yeah.
Because there he is, living in luxury, having been accused of doing what he's accused of doing. So how much longer do you think he can stay there?
Well, he's going to watertight lease. They'd have to, if he puts his foot down, they'll have to get lawyers involved.
But I think you can pay him a sum and have him out. Yeah,
about £500,000.
Yeah,
the
Crown Estate will have to give him £500,000 to get him out. Well, that's going to stick in the craw a bit.
Yeah, but if you paid him £500,000 to get him out, you could rent that out for a lot more money if that's what you wish.
I do think that is in Westminster yesterday. That's what people were talking about. How much longer can he continue to live the life of luxury, all the trappings of a senior royal, when he's not a senior royal anymore?
You've also got a building head of steam politically, the SNP, the Labour peer, George Fawkes, other MPs, backbench Labour MPs, saying that they want Parliament to get involved now, and they want Parliament to divest Prince Andrew properly of his title of Duke of York.
Because currently it's just on the shelf.
Well, somebody gave a very interesting analogy to this. It's a little bit like his Royal Rolls-Royce has been not confiscated, but put in the garage. They've let the tyres down and they've taken away the keys, but he's still got his Rolls-Royce in the garage.
Like the MP for York, Rachel Maskell, elected Labour, currently independent, she wants it gone through as well, because she said people in York don't want
to be tarnished.
Yeah, with him. But Downing Street wants to avoid this as far as it can, because it fears it might backfire later if the king mutters, "Oh, you know, I never wanted this. I was opposed."
Really?
Didn't
so
think it should happen. But the king's in the back seat here. You talk about the Rolls-Royce. He's on the back seat. The statement on Friday, without any contrition, was from Andrew.
Yeah, it was.
Came via Buckingham Palace, but it wasn't the king saying, "I've decided he can't use his titles anymore." It was Andrew saying he'd nobly, out of duty to his family and his country...
And that's not right.
What is the hesitancy then from the king? Is it just, as soon as you speak out, you're in it? Or is it just that it's his brother, or what is the...
If he goes along with this and Parliament then votes to strip the Duke of York title formally, gone forever, the concern will be, does Parliament come back in a few years' time with another royal who's deemed to be perhaps Prince Harry's next? Do they come after Prince Harry because he's the Duke of Sussex? When does he ever set foot in Sussex? So it would begin to unravel and undermine the whole hereditary principle of the monarchy.
I think
although Amy Wallace, you know, speaking on behalf of Virginia Giuffre, her ghostwriter, says it would make such an extraordinary difference to all victims of trafficking and abuse if the king did speak up on that.
If he spoke up now, of course, Camilla, I can't believe I'm doing this and being generous to a royal, but Camilla the Queen, of course, is making abuse against women one of her big issues. But I think Charles, he's got yes, the brother issue. How far do you push away an errant brother? And then, secondly, it's self-interest for the monarchy protecting and not wanting Parliament getting involved.
Well, that was always the view of the Queen.
And, of course, Prince Andrew does vehemently deny. We're speaking to Peter Kyle, the Science Secretary, a little bit later on. We're going to ask him about this. Would you think he'll sit on the fence?
Yes, 100%. No doubt whatsoever.
Yeah, he won't want to be asked by it, and of course it's not in his power to make the policy.
He'll say it's a matter for the palace.
Yeah.
OK, just before we move on to the grooming scandal story, which is an extraordinary story, we saw in the week after Diana died that the palace didn't read the room right. But the Queen, being pretty quick on her feet, realised something had to be done, and she came down and she made that extraordinary address on television. Now, no one's suggesting that the king should make some kind of televised address about this, but do you think the time has come for him to make, whether it's a statement about the victims or a statement generally about Andrew, that he should go on the record rather than leaving it to his errant brother to make the statement on Friday?
I suspect there'll be legal advice involved in all of this.
Right.
Because there are... The book says, the Giuffre book says that Prince Andrew took part in an orgy in Epstein's Caribbean island with 8 young girls. So there could be all sorts of legal cases. So if the king then speaks out and talks about his brother, who's always denied everything, I think there could be legal issues, and I think that would be a factor.
Which, of course, is why I'm going to say Prince Andrew vehemently denies the allegations.
It's always in fairness and also legal reasons to point that out. But,
well, it's important because, you know...
I try not to grimace every time I hear it. But in 1997, with the Queen and Diana's death, she was advised by Tony Blair and Downing Street, which I think had a much better feel for public opinion at that time. You know, the People's Princess and everything, while the royals were staying on holiday and didn't quite get it. I think here, if you were advising Charles, the king, you would say you're going to have to make a speech at some point on...
Agree.
Even if it's legally...
On the victims, expressing, you know, you say all victims everywhere, including in the UK.
Yeah. Even if, you know, a lawyer would have to go over every word, I think some kind of firm statement on behalf of victims would be very welcome.
This has been hugely damaging for the monarchy, the institution.
And the problem for Prince Andrew and the denials, which of course it's legitimate for media outlets like us to read out, is that he's been caught out in a major lie. He was explicit in saying that he'd had no communication with Epstein after December 2010, and now we know that he was not just sending him a card occasionally, but in negotiations in how to smear Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah, and gushing over a disgusting paedophile.
Let's play some more.
Yeah,
let's play some more. We're in this together.
Do you know, he's lucky we're not in more old, more ancient times, because previous Dukes of York have been beheaded.
That's going a little far, even for the Daily Mail. I have to say.
I know, but, well, no, he can hide, can't he?
Now, let's talk about the grooming scandal. Big front-page story on the Telegraph. We'll be talking to two of the victims of the grooming scandal
Well,
a bit
one of
later
them, Ellie
on.
Reynolds, is the one that we're speaking
That's
to,
right.
isn't it, this morning?
Basically, this follows the report by Baroness Casey a short time ago that found that Asian men were disproportionately responsible for the scandal, the grooming scandal, in which children were groomed for sex by gangs in towns and cities across Britain, particularly in the north. She also found that the police didn't investigate properly because they were frightened of being viewed as racist. Now, that was all on the record. That was the report, and the inquiry. Finally, Labour set up the inquiry to look into it. Now we hear that two of the members of the panel that's looking into this, who are victims and were there because they were victims and could bring a very specific light to bear on this, have resigned because they say it's turning into a whitewash. Now, this is very damaging for the government.
Yeah, and they're arguing that that the terms of reference or the inquiry will not allow them to make the point that they were victims of gangs that were predominantly men of Pakistani origin, and they say that the inquiry is trying to tone down the race element of it.
It was in South and West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester on the statistics available in those three areas. But this is history repeating itself, because I recall when the last inquiry
You're talking about the Casey report now, was on those areas.
Yes, the Casey report found South and West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester.
Because I think this is supposed to be looking...
nationally, but it was those three areas you found Pakistani men were disproportionately involved in what they call group sex abuse. But this is history repeating itself, because the last inquiry, which I think lasted 6 years, it was chaired by Alexis Jay eventually, I think it was two of the chairs who were proposed were pushed back by the survivors, saying they couldn't be independent. And if they're objecting now, the two people proposed, one was a former chief police officer, one was from social work. Both are areas that failed, unquestionably failed.
It was systems that they felt failed.
But I would just point out that Alexis Jay, who did the Rotherham report and then did the 6-year inquiry, was from a social work background. I think it's... But you've got to have the confidence of the survivors, the victims.
And what becomes a problem, I guess, for those that are trying to set up this inquiry is I guess, that you know, people need to have experience in the areas that are going to be under scrutiny, and that is going to be social services and how police operated. But on the flip side, I suppose the survivors absolutely need to feel that their voices are being heard. But it does make you wonder, and we'll ask Ellie, who should run that inquiry?
But this is, but this thing is, the Prime Minister said this inquiry was going to be set up 4 months ago. We still don't know who's going to chair it, and they've got to get on with it. And there is also a criticism that Labour are trying to stall this because a number of the councils involved, particularly in the north of England, were run by Labour. So were Labour councils turning a blind eye in conjunction with the police were turning a blind eye to what was clearly, overtly racial attacks on these mainly white young girls.
Let me just quote from the front page of the Telegraph this morning. It's interesting. It says that the two victims, the two women who've now walked out, they've just had enough. They say that the shortlisted candidates for inquiry chairman were, as we've said, established insiders from two professions, social workers and the police, both previously involved in covering up the grooming scandals, and they allege that the victims feel that they were being silenced yet again by, and I quote, condescending and controlling language being used towards us, and that some appointments to the inquiry appeared biased towards Labour and therefore risk a conflict of interest. It sounds like a mess, and there are calls now for it to be just scrapped and started again with a judge heading it. So it's a proper judicial inquiry.
Well, I think that's the answer, actually. Because judges have wide experience.
No vested interest.
Exactly. And they're not going to be tarred by a suggestion they're part of a profession that took part in the cover-up.
Unless the judge he or she is taking part in a court case
Well,
is taking part in a court case which had an outcome which the survivors don't accept. But whoever it is, and judges are used to running. You run a court, so they could run an inquiry.
Of course they could.
Yes. You can't just take somebody off the street to run an inquiry. They're incredibly complex to operate.
It just makes the victims look like nobody's listening to them again.
Well, and that is the last thing anybody wants. I'm just going to put the Home Office comment on this, just to give all balance to all the sides. A spokesperson has said that any suggestion that this inquiry is being watered down is completely wrong. We are committed to delivering a robust, thorough inquiry that will get to the truth and provide the answers survivors have long campaigned for. We're working urgently to appoint the best chair to take forward this work and deliver justice, putting victims and survivors at the heart of the process. But if at least 2 already have felt that they cannot take part of it, it doesn't bode well, does it?
It's not.
Well, how many other survivors are on that liaison panel? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are they happy? Because survivors as a group are unlikely to have one view on anything in truth. But at the moment, no, the inquiry is in turmoil, unquestionably.
Now, another big story this morning. The Metropolitan Police have announced that they will no longer investigate what are called non-crime hate incidents. They say they want to allow their officers to focus on matters that meet a threshold for criminal investigation.
I feel Kevin's going to be very pleased about this, are you?
Do you mean Andrew?
No, but you're right.
Oh, my God, I was looking at you.
That was a non-hate crime,
Can I just
and
say,
I'm calling the police.
I was calling my daughter my friend's pet dog's name all weekend, so this is where you got to with me.
But also, I want to say,
Kevin McGuire,
you will be hearing from my solicitor.
You don't want to be
that is appalling.
I said that you're going to...
Common sense. It's common sense. They're not crimes, so why are they investigating?
Well, this follows the announcement that the Met confirmed, this is just prior to this, that it was dropping a probe into the Father Ted scriptwriter, Graham Linehan, after he was arrested at Heathrow Airport when he flew back into the country on suspicion of inciting violence in post-Sonex. He suggested that somebody be grabbed by the
5 police officers.
But the challenge with this is, though, is definitions of what is a hate crime and isn't. So, for instance, a hate crime incident is when it's a criminal offence, that's why it's a criminal one, is when it's perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's actual or perceived race, religion, disability, sexual orientation or transgender identity. Now, isn't that when it becomes a problem? Because when is a crime and when it's not a crime? And how do the Met Police know before they've investigated it?
It's normally if you're not inciting the hatred and you're not inciting violence.
Well, yes, but there was an argument that Graham Linehan's tweets, I mean, they're not pursuing it, so they found it's not, were for many people inciting hatred of transgender people. And it becomes a very grey area,
at times sometimes he has a go at me. I mean, he's locked in this battle now with trans people, and on both sides there's absolute poison. There's poison from him at times, and he gets really aggressive. But you read that tweet. I just did not think that was worthy of police investigation.
5 of them.
Well, that was because it was at the airport. I suspect a couple of them wanted to go along and just, it's him, is it? The Father Ted writer probably wanted to go along and see him.
It's a really important point. It is not against the law in this country to be offensive.
No.
And he was offensive to some people, but that does not make it illegal.
If somebody...
But they were arguing it could lead to physical or verbal abuse of transgender people. And I feel for the police in this, because they have to try and interpret it.
So do I. So if somebody complains, you log the complaint, you say, yep, he's in this battle with trans people, but has he crossed a line here? You may not like what he says, you may find it offensive.
So what?
But has he crossed a line? And no, if he hasn't, you just log it. You don't have to arrest and interview.
When I joined Granada Television in the 1980s, one of the big presenters there was a guy called Tony Wilson, who many people, particularly in Manchester, will remember very fondly. And all over Manchester at that time, there was graffiti in the same font that said, Tony Wilson is a and a word beginning with a W and ending with an R. It was everywhere. And I remember looking out of the newsroom window. And I remember looking out of the newsroom window the day that I arrived. You could see it from the newsroom window, one of these slogans. And I turned to Tony, I just met, and I said, do you not mind that? And he turned to me, and this is 30, 40 years ago, and he said, it's called free speech and fair comment, Rich. And anyway, it's true.